welcome to a special episode of the Racing News 365 podcast. The reason why it's special, well, joining myself, Nick Golding, and lead editor Ian Parks is none other than four-time Le Mans 24 Hours winner, four-time World Endurance Championship champion, Season 2 Formula E champion, and former F1 driver, Sebastien Buemi. Seb, firstly, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, for your time. You are probably at the moment one of, if not the busiest drivers in motorsport. You've, of course, recently had races with Envision in Formula E in Tokyo and Shanghai. You're preparing with Toyota for your 14th Le Mans 24 Hours. Had to get that number out there. And, of course, when you're not doing WEC or FE, you're with Red Bull in the simulator. So to kick things off, how are you? How have you been? And how crazy is this time of year for you?
Yeah, I'm obviously great. I'm currently in Le Mans. We just got in yesterday, so today and tomorrow, obviously, we're getting ready for the test day on Sunday. So yeah, as you say, it's a busy period now with Formula E. Obviously, lots of races in the last months with Monaco and Tokyo and Shanghai. So, and in between, obviously, the 24 hours of Le Mans. We're here now for the next 10 days, and it's going to be, as usual, an amazing event. So I've not been much in the Red Bull sim lately, because of all the stuff I had to do with Formula E and WEC, but that will follow up once the championships are, calming down over the summer. So busy schedule, but obviously always happy to be doing as much.
Ian, how are you, mate? I mean, how cool is it that we've got Seb on the podcast?
Well, I've got to bow down, mate, because as anybody knows that listens in regularly to this podcast, you often introduce me as the man, the myth, the legend, simply because of my longevity as a Formula One journalist, now going many, many years, 2 decades, something like that. But we are in the presence of a true man, the myth, the legend. Given that roll call of honour that you reeled off there for Mr. Sebastien Buemi, that is just a phenomenal record. 14 Le Mans. I mean, that is some going. Seb, I've got a question for you. Did you just say you've just been on a track walk?
Yeah, I did. Actually, we were supposed to do the podcast a couple of hours.
Yeah. Is that all 13.6 kilometers of it?
No, we had a special one, actually. Toyota had a fuel cell bus. So we basically went, most of the engineers and the drivers, but we walked up to Tête Rouge, and then we took the bus, basically, and stopped in all the chicanes and in Mulsanne and Indianapolis. And then they dropped us at the Porsche corners, and then we walked the rest. So, of course, we did not walk the whole 13.6 kilometers. But yeah, sorry, I was late for the podcast,
All good. Well, have you ever walked the full circuit?
Yeah, I did. I think I even ran it a few years ago, but obviously we we decided to just do it like that, took some pictures with that fuel cell bus, and it's always a good opportunity to discuss with the engineers. There's quite a few corners that have been resurfaced as well, so it was nice to obviously see them, and know what to expect on Sunday.
I mean, just to kick things off, I mean, this is, of course, going into your 14th Le Mans. Does it still feel special every single time this week comes around, as it was when your first one came back in 2012, believe it or not?
Yeah, it is still special. Obviously, having more experience is kind of nice, having a very stable regulation for the last few years with the car. You know exactly what to expect, and you've been already trying lots of things on that car, so we know it well. We know, what the stuff we learned throughout the season last year, and we try to implement some of it on the track. So obviously it's for everyone the same, but the experience is always helping. But it remains a special week. It remains, special 10 days, and I always look forward to those 10 days because they do feel amazing.
And Ian, I think it's interesting because obviously you've got Le Mans clashing with obviously the Canadian Grand Prix this year. I'm not sure which is going to be spoken about more in Canada itself, F1 or Le Mans, because it seems that every single driver in F1 at the moment wants to give Le Mans a go.
We've heard a few, haven't we? I mean, we know that many have already undertaken it. and it's always that special event, as Seb's just pointed out. But to have both on the same weekend, I always feel that's a little bit of a shame. I always feel that Le Mans should have its own weekend. It did last year. It was not on a Formula One weekend. So to have the two kind of clashing in many respects, yes, I appreciate that the Grand Prix starts later on Sunday. It will start after the Le Mans is finished, of course, but so people have got a bit of back-to-back motorsport fest. But I do feel that because Le Mans is that real special event in the motorsport calendar, not just the wet calendar, but the motorsport calendar, that it should have its standalone weekend so people can focus solely on that. Seb, do you agree with me on that? Do you feel it's a little bit of a shame that F1 Grand Prix Canada clashes with Le Mans?
Yeah, and I guess if it was all down to the FIA, it wouldn't happen. But obviously, FOM is trying to put so many races. At some point, it becomes difficult to find some weekends, and they just had a triple header in Formula One. So
Yeah.
doing another race this weekend obviously would have been maybe nicer for the fans, because obviously next week then would have been free. But yeah, I find it sad as well because I feel like, out of those whatever 8-9 months we are racing, we should be able to just not have another big event on that same weekend. But as you said, at least the race is going to start after the race is done in Le Mans. And yeah, it's not as bad as what we had a few years back when we had the race during the Baku Grand Prix.
Yeah.
And of course, I mean, Canada clashes have obviously been a big talking point, obviously with FE and work as well. But going back, obviously, to the point on the fact that so many F1 drivers, Seb, at the moment are speaking about Le Mans and wanting to do it. Max Verstappen being one of the biggest. Obviously, Charles Leclerc, Fernando Alonso wants to go back. Oscar Piastri, Esteban Ocon. The list is endless. What is going so right for WEC at the moment, which you think is making all these F1 drivers want to go and give Le Mans a go?
Well, I guess it's difficult to just come up with one example of things, but the track I think is special for everyone. The race itself, a 24-hour race, on a track like that, the cars, the fan, the atmosphere. I think Charles and a few people have been visiting already, and it's difficult if you visit to not think, okay, I wanna try it myself. And the fact that we're having so many brands, obviously manufacturer joining the championship, you have plenty of opportunities, to compete and also compete for victory, which in the past was not really the case. When we used to have a couple of brands only, there were not many seats, and obviously difficult to have an opportunity to fight at the front. Where now, if you look at the grid, lots of cars could be fighting for the win. So I guess it makes it very exciting, and the racing itself, a few hours to the end last year with 6 or 7 cars following each other for the lead. I guess it's a great event, and I think most drivers wants to take part.
Something I'm really interested about, because obviously, as I mentioned at the top of the podcast, you're not just a Formula racer for Envision, you're not just a WEC driver for Toyota, you're not just Red Bull's F1 simulator driver, you're doing all these things at the same time. And of course, with that comes a lot of travel. I imagine a lot of physical and mental fatigue. How do you stay on top of that? How do you stay mentally and physically fit? And of course, adjust as well to jumping between so many different cars, but also working with different teams?
Yeah, I guess obviously organization is key. You have to be well organized. You have to have a good logistic, uh, planner to just make the most out of the situation. But I would say stability in terms of teams, that is also key. I've been with Toyota since 2012. I've been part of the Red Bull program since 2005 now, so over 20 years. I've been now with Envision for the third season. And the fact that you have stability, I feel like it allows you to do more things. Things are well programmed. I know exactly what to expect. Also, in the Toyota environment, I've been for so long. The steering wheel's been the same for the last 10 years. The switches. It makes it easier to go from one car to the next. Where if you keep changing teams, it's a bit more difficult. So organization, and full commitment. At the end of the day, you want to do that properly. You have to fully commit. You cannot just do that half. And I often feel that the fact of doing Formula E is obviously very good for me in the WEC, because when you come back from Shanghai, where we've had one of those peloton race with all those cars close to each other, you have to be really awake when you do one of those races. And then the next race on the wet, then you come into WEC, you feel really sharp. If you only do WEC and you do those 8 races a year, it's again, it works for a lot of people, but I feel like for me at least, I have an edge with the fact that I'm doing more. Of course, you have to be doing it in a good way. You have to arrive well prepared, rested. It's not always easy, but so far I think it's been positive for me to do all of this together.
Seb, I'm just curious. Do you have somebody that organises your calendar, or do you do it all yourself?
Yeah, obviously have people in all the teams helping me obviously book the flights and the hotels and the rental cars, but I have it all in my head. So I basically tell them what I would like, and they book it for me. The problem is I've tried to have people help me, but they don't know. They have so many things. I'm going to the sim for Formula E, and then I'm going to the sim in Red Bull, and then I'm going back and going with my car. Nobody can obviously know properly, so it's better that I know where I'm going. I'm just telling the people what to book, and it's much easier.
Is there ever a period of time where you do not know whether you're coming and going, given the different places and time zones that you might be in?
Last night I woke up and just for like 2 or 3 seconds, I didn't know where I was. I'm sure it already happened to you in the past, when you wake up
Oh
and
yeah,
you're not sure where you are. And
yeah.
of course, after a couple of seconds, I knew, but it's been a lot. Lately, it's been a lot, but luckily, I did not get sick, touch wood, but I've been, I've been well organized, and I was able to. I've done the Jakarta simulation on Monday and Tuesday, and now I'm here, all rested and ready to go into the week.
Well,
I
you've
actually
had.
had that.
Go on, Ian.
I'm just going to interrupt there now. I actually had that last weekend when I was at the Spanish Grand Prix because, as you know, I've done the back-to-back-to-back. I've done Imola, Monaco, and Spain. I'd been home in between the three Grand Prix, and then I woke up, and I think it was on the Saturday or the Sunday morning. I'd had a poor night's sleep. I woke up really early, and as Seb said, it was like literally for a few seconds, it was like, where am I? Not what hotel I'm in, what country am I in for a second? It was a bit crazy like that. So I've got a little bit of an idea of what Seb goes through. His schedule is way more crazy than mine, I've got to say.
I mean, Seb, you've had not only a lot of time zones to get used to recently, a lot of wet weather, it's fair to say, as well, in Tokyo and Shanghai. I mean, looking at Le Mans, is there rain on the horizon, or what are you expecting weather-wise?
Yeah, I think it's been raining yesterday and a bit today, but tomorrow should be okay. And then it's going to get really hot on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then the weather is going to get worse on Thursday. But from what I heard, there shouldn't be any rain during the race, but it's still like, over a week before. So I guess we'll wait a bit before we say, we had rain in Monaco, we had rain in Tokyo, we had
Yeah.
rain in Shanghai. So lately, I've been driving quite a bit on the rain.
It's something I really want to ask you about because, of course, through Red Bull, you obviously get to spend some time with Max Verstappen, or should I say Franz Hermann, of course. He's taken a bit of a liking to the Nordschleife recently. He's the one who has spoken about wanting to do Le Mans more than anybody else. How quickly do you think he would be able to adjust if he was to go and do the 24 hours of Le Mans?
Directly. Absolutely directly. Yeah. I mean, he's doing so much simulation. He knows the race already very, very well. He knows the schedule. He knows how it works. When I got to Le Mans, uh, I had watched it on TV a few times, but I didn't have much of an idea of how the weekend would go. His dad obviously did it. He knows it perfectly. Even if he's never taken part to the race, he knows exactly how the weekend will go and how it works. So I have absolutely no worry that it would be directly pretty impressive.
Now, bearing in mind that nobody's watching, nobody's listening, Seb. It's just between us friends here. Have you spoken to him about it privately at all, just out of interest?
I mean, I didn't see him for quite a long time, but the last time we discussed about everything. I mean, he's passionate. He asked me a lot about Formula E. We spoke about work. Obviously, I remember I used to talk about the weight, between the drivers. being a factor also for him to compete, which has been somehow, um, I would say, adjusted now, with the average of the three drivers. It's not ideal yet, obviously if you are heavy, it's still a bit of an issue, but that was something he wanted to be clear and amended before he would take part. But I'm sure, Formula One is extremely heavy. It's a heavy schedule. It's very difficult to commit to do Le Mans. But I know it's just a matter of time until he actually does it.
That's the thing about Max, isn't it? That we know he is ingrained in motorsport, any motorsport. As Seb's just pointed out, he was asking Seb about Formula E and all that kind of stuff. We know he loves his sim racing. This is a guy, and Christian mentioned
he's
it as
passionate.
well. Passionate. It's just laser focused. I mean, obviously he's got different things going on now. He's just become a dad, of course. So that might just change that focus a little bit. But Max's laser vision focus on motorsport is just phenomenal. And Seb's obviously had a much closer glimpse of that than you or I will ever get. Me in particular, of course. Yes, I might have been around Max Verstappen in a Formula One paddock and done a few interviews with him over the years. But nevertheless, as Seb's just pointed out, he is driven. He's probably one of the most driven characters I've ever come across.
I want to move the conversation for a bit over to Formula E, Seb, because of course you're also a 14-time racer in F1, the most of any driver, just to add to your accolades and how successful you've been across pretty much everything. But I want to roll the clock back to just over a month ago in Monaco, where obviously you ended what was an almost 6-year winless drought in F1. In miserable weather, in the rain, you jumped into the swimming pool. I mean, how was that moment for you, ending, what was a really long period of difficulties for you in F1? Was it almost a bit of a self-reminder that you do have what it takes in F1?
Yeah, I guess it was a very emotional moment, actually. My parents were there. They only comes, once a year. It was obviously a perfect race, in Formula E. You have so many different variables, that can lead you to do a good race or a bad one. When you take the attack modes, whether you have a safety car while you take it or not, the boost charge on the first race. But obviously that particular race, everything went well. I took my attack modes at the right time. I made the right moves. And in the end, I was lucky to not have any kind of full course yellow or safety car. So, sometimes you need all those stars to align if you want to win. And as you say, it's been such a long time. I mean, a few times I came quite close to winning. Last year in London, I've been leading the race for a long time, or Berlin, finished second, third a few times. But obviously to win again, it was very good for the team, but also very good for myself to know, okay, if you do the right job at the right time, you actually has what it takes to win, because of course after over 5 years not winning, I mean, even if you are confident in yourself, I mean, you cannot deny that at some point you are wondering whether you can still do it. So the winning was good, and then Tokyo was also a strong weekend for us with P4. We should have been on the podium without that safety car, that allowed Stoffel to basically do the boost charge under the red flag. And I thought I had 2 strong weekends. Obviously, Shanghai was not very good, but those 2 weekends were not bad. And obviously we're trying to fight at the front, but as I said, winning again was very good for the morale of the team.
When you go through a period, sorry, Nick, when you go through a period like that, Seb, do you ever wonder, is it going to happen?
Yeah, you do. I mean, even if I should not say it. You should always say that you've got it, and of course you at some point you doubt. It's normal. You are always as good as your last race, and at some point when you did not win for such a long time, of course, Formula E, like any other categories, you need the right team, the right car, you need everything, and you need to also deliver when it matters. And we did that day in Monaco, and obviously to win one race, it's always amazing when you do win Monaco.
And of course, you've won WEC races over those 5 years. So did that kind of help a little bit with the mentality that You know,
Yeah.
you know that you are a good racing driver. You have still got it, but as you say, more often than not, it just takes everything to come together. They're almost like perfect storm.
Yes. Yeah. No, I mean, I've been winning quite a lot of races and championship in WEC in those 5 years. But yeah, as you say, you realize that you need everything to be able to win. And we often say that you create your own luck. So at some point, I'm not someone that wants to find excuses. If I don't deliver, I just say it. I have no problem with it. And I try to get better, learn from the mistakes, try to do a better job. But yeah, I mean, mentally, it's not always easy. And then you see people solely focusing on one category and starting to do well. You start to wonder, is it because I'm driving a different car? And now, yeah, I'm quite confident to confirm that no, driving different cars is better, in my opinion, clearly. So just need to make sure, we as a team, we do put everything together to fight at the front. And we did it in Monaco, so we are able to do it.
What was the water temperature like in the swimming pool? Was it a bit chilly?
No, it was like
No.
30 degrees. I
Oh,
was
really?
expecting
Oh,
it,
wow.
yes. I mean, everyone thought it was chilly, but it was not. Actually, it was
Nice.
the jump, but I mean, it was 10 meters. I don't recall the last time I jumped from 10 meters. It looked really high when I was up there, but then I said, now I've got to do it, no choice.
Yeah.
I mean, you said it in the media pen. That was your own fault.
Yeah.
So it's not quite on the back of the Red Bull floating building that they have at the Monaco Grand Prix. This was a proper swimming pool that you jumped into.
Yeah, the Monaco one, just after the
Yeah.
chicane. So
Yeah. Nice.
On the topic of Formula E, I mean, you are, as we referred to, one of the OGs. You've been around since day one. There's not many of you left. The category has changed a lot over the last 11 years, both in terms of the technology itself, in terms of its fan base, and of course, it's taking another humongous step with Gen 4, of course, where the cars are going to be as quick, if not quicker, than F2. What have you made of the category's progression? Obviously, is well when the fact that F1 kind of remains its big brother in a way.
Well, I mean, the first car, nobody knew what to expect, and the car was obviously quite slow, and the racing was not bad, and the championship was doing a good job, and it did attract a lot of manufacturer. But we had, that problem of having to swap cars, which obviously not everyone liked. And then the second car was really about making sure you could do the race with one car, and that the range was big enough to do a full race. And then the third car, it was more about the efficiency, making sure you would recover with the front wheels and you would be able to have just a more efficient car. And then the Gen 3 Evo that we currently drive, it's more about performance, making sure you can use those four-wheel drive out of the corners. You can create a real offset when you take the attack mode. You have much more potential and you can pass cars. And then Gen 4 will be about ultimate performance. It's really about making sure and being able to say, okay, we have the range, but we have a fast car, a car that in Monaco is going to be apparently a lot faster than an F2. It's really going to be quite close to F1. I mean, the 2026 F1, of course. And yeah, I can't wait to see that car. I mean, it's a bigger car, it's a longer car, but it's going to be a much faster car. And I feel like it's always difficult for the FIA and Formula E to know exactly where to go, because you need to follow a little bit the trend, what people want to do, what the manufacturers want to have, So, of course, we have a lot of energy management in Formula E, but now I really feel like people want performance. We want to see that the Formula E car can be, a very fast single seater.
Do you think that's the key for Formula E's future? Because it has been on this glide path, but it seems to be a very slow glide path towards really capturing the public imagination. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I've seen Formula E race up close and personal. I wasn't particularly enamored with it, but we are going back several years ago now, one of the earlier seasons. I'm sure it's come on an awful lot, and I'm sure be far more impressed with what's happened over a period of time.
I mean, clearly the new Gen 4, it's going to be the biggest step of performance since, the beginning, like bigger from Gen 2, Gen 1 to Gen 2, or even Gen 3 Evo. It's going to be a lot faster. People are expecting lap times around from what I heard, between 115 and 118 in Monaco, which obviously it's clearly a lot faster than F2. Um, but yeah, the problem also is, I mean, it's not because I've done well in Monaco, but I watched the F1 race in Monaco and I watched the Formula E race. I thought the Formula E race was way more interesting to watch,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Of course, a good Formula One race outside of Monaco is also very nice to watch, but I thought the Formula E race was much better in Monaco. Now the question is, what will happen with those much faster and bigger cars? Are the racing still going to be as good? Is it going to be worse? We all know if you have a bigger car and a faster car, it's going to be way more difficult to pass in Monaco, for sure. So
The range.
where,
Yeah.
where is the right compromise? Where is it? What do you want to achieve? You want good lap times, ensure that single seater can be fast, or you want good racing? And to have everything together is extremely difficult.
Of course, your own future has been a talking point this season in FE, and of course, it's looking like good news in terms of the FE and wet calendars for next year. The fact you are in really good form at the moment, does it make you want to stick around for season 12 and maybe then for Gen 4 as well?
Yeah, I mean, there is some good discussion, and I cannot, deny that obviously doing well lately it's been a very big boost. And also, the fact that, the Gen 4 coming in, with everything I know about it, I'd be really happy and tempted to drive that car if I could. So, I mean, now we've had, those calendars are not yet out, but from what I heard, it's looking quite good to have no clashes. And if we could, have a bit of continuity with the calendars and not have any clashes, that would be obviously extremely important, because regardless on how many clashes we have, if we have one, it's already too much. People are not willing to have drivers that have, that will have to miss races. And of course, I have to agree with that. So again, I've said it again and again. It's of course easy to criticize the calendars, but with most of the wet calendar happening after the last race of Formula E, and Formula E starting way before WEC starts, you would still assume that somehow we should be able to avoid those 3 months, and just 3 races not to clash. So, I think the FIA and Formula and ACO are trying the best they can. Let's see when the calendar officially comes out, but if we could, not have any clash, it would be obviously very good for the future.
You have a smile on your face. Sorry, very quickly. You have a smile on your face every single time the word Gen 4 comes up. I mean, you probably more than anybody else has a very good idea about what's coming for Gen 4, but also what's coming with the new F1 regs as well, obviously for your work with Red Bull. And obviously, they're both coming in next season, F1 at the start of the year, FE Gen 4 at the end of the year. How excited are you to see both in action? Because as you mentioned yourself, Gen 4 is going to be kind of unlike anything FE has seen before.
Yeah, the Gen 4 will be a huge step, because it's going to be a lot of power, and it's going to be 4-wheel drive, and it's going to be bigger tires and more downforce. So it's just difficult to know exactly how much faster that will be. Formula One, even so there is a very strong development, it's difficult to predict because the development is hard. You never know what the teams can do. Many times it looks like it's going to be a lot slower, and then by race one, it's nearly as fast as the previous car. So it's difficult to predict, but it still looks like 2026 will be quite a bit slower. So let's see, where those two cars end up, being, but I'm looking forward to it. I'm obviously very interested to see.
You touched on, yeah, no, I think the major thing that we've touched on, or Seb touched on for me, is this hopping from seat to seat. And I really want to get a grasp on, is it that difficult? So you go from an F1 simulator, you go to a Formula E race, you go in a wet race. As I say, you touched on it a little bit, Seb, and you talked about the experience that you've built up and the enjoyment that you've built up as well, going from car to car. But is it that difficult when you go from different category to different category?
A few years ago, I would say it was more difficult. The fact that, as I said, I've had a lot of stability. I've been with the Red Bull guys in the simulator for the last 10 years. I know it perfectly, and I've been jumping in the Toyota car for the last 14 years. And Formula E. So when you have a lot of stability and a good mindset and the simulator, like I wouldn't say you switch off, but you go into Shanghai, you've done the Formula E sim before, you're fully Formula E. I would say you forget about work. And now I'm in different environment. I've been sitting today, we've done pit stop practice, and I didn't feel like, oh, that feels weird, that feels wrong, like the sitting position. No, because I've been doing it so many times in the last 10 years that I'd say it's getting easier to jump from one car to the other. The first time you do it, it feels wrong. The sitting position feels wrong, but in fact, it's not changed. It's just because you've driven something else in the meantime. So I would not say it's an issue so far. Clearly not.
Interesting. Something I've spoken to you about back in Miami for FE, Seb, was at the time in F1 there was the new rear wing TD was coming at that point. We've now had, of course, the front wing technical directive as well. Have you been surprised the fact that McLaren was so quick in Spain, given that obviously they were the team who kind of had the most eyes on them regarding the wings?
Yeah, I mean, they were dominating before, so everyone, I guess, were hoping that they would get a bit slower, and I mean, it's hard for me. I've not been in Red Bull lately, so I can't tell you exactly all the details, but when I watch TV, I thought it was still bending those wings, I mean, maybe less, but I could still see that they were moving quite a bit. So looking at it from the outside again, it looks like it was a big story for not that much in the end. So yeah, let's wait. I'm sure people now have learned quite a bit about it and may tweak everything. But yeah, it looks like it was a lot. Performance-wise, doesn't feel like it has changed the order much. And in my opinion, as I said, when you look it from the camera, it still looks like it's moving, So yeah, I guess
That's,
we'll have to see if it still changes or
that's because the static load test is only 100 newtons,
yeah.
around 100 kilogram. And of course, a car hurtling down a straight and into a corner, I've heard that it could be around 300 newtons. So naturally, you're never going to get a completely stiff front wing to accommodate 300 newtons of force on a Formula One car when it's on track. So that's why there's that discrepancy there as to why it still looks like it might just be flexing.
Seb, something that's kind of been another big talking point, going back to Monaco a little bit, is of course you have, I mean, so little overtakes for F1, but then you have hundreds for Formula E, and there's so many talks about in F1, people are saying, let's try this, let's do that. Is there anything which for Formula One you think can be done to make Monaco exciting?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you heard about or you saw the proposal of Alex
Yeah.
Wirtz, he's obviously an advisor in Toyota, he's a good friend of mine, and we've been discussing about it a lot. And I mean, when you have a car that is as wide as an F1 car, I mean, I'm sure you've seen an F1 car right now. I mean, every time I get shocked when we do that start procedure in Formula E and we park basically in the grid position of Formula One. I feel like I could fit 2 Formula E cars in one of those grid spots, and then I'm thinking, wow, if the car was as wide as the grid box, obviously it's not as wide as that. I mean, the guy is driving in the middle of the road, you can't pass left, right, just impossible. So unless you make Monaco way wider, you need, if you want some overtaking, you need 2 things. You need rain or you need a bit of a different layout. And I thought some of the idea of Alex were kind of very good. If it's enough, I don't think it's enough, but it could be something quite easy to implement. I think he came up with 3 proposals, with the chicane to delay the new chicane a bit. Obviously, that would be quite complex because they would need to make it wider where there is right now no possibilities to make it wider. And then the Raskas and the Lowe's corner. I thought they were good ideas. Some people are talking about making the straight line longer, turn 8 before the tunnel to go a bit further. You need the DRS to work, and then in those two DRS zones we have, if someone goes on the inside at the exit of the tunnel, it's nearly impossible to pass. And in turn one, because it's not really straight, the guys goes again on the inside, it's impossible to make the move, So I feel like it's going to be three options. You make the car a lot smaller, you have rain, or you change a bit the track. No other possibilities, in my opinion.
I mean, the wheelbase is 20 millimeters smaller next year, but even then, I don't think that's going to make too much of a difference. But as Seb's pointed out, I think Rascasse and Fairmont, they seem to be relatively easy changes to make to the track, just widening the apex, widening the entry, just to offer something. But the key one is obviously extending the straight out of the tunnel before you hit the chicane. Unfortunately, that takes a lot of engineering because you've got to build into the port to the left-hand side. And of course, for the ACM, it's going to take probably a lot of money as well. And they might not be willing to invest in that. But there were some good proposals by Alex, and Seb's got Alex's ear, obviously. So you'll have to stay tuned with Seb, Nick, and maybe you might get a little bit of information on the side.
I'll have to keep asking. Seb, of course, on the topic of 2026, from speaking to you in Miami, you said that obviously you are helping the team ahead of next year's regulations change. And obviously for Red Bull of all teams, the fact they are becoming their own powertrain supplier as well, how difficult is it this year, given how dominant McLaren look, it's fair to be said, to time that switch of focus solely to 2026 during this season when obviously, at least in the driver's title, Max, it seems, does still have something to play for?
Yeah, I guess that's always big questions. As I said, I've not been in the last few weeks, so it's difficult to have a clear picture. But Max, that he can overperform the car, and when you look at he got, I think, 2 pole positions this year, but many times it was extremely close. And if you look at the race in Barcelona, I think before, I mean, I was flying at the time where they had the safety car. It was not that far, like I think it was 4 seconds behind Norris. So, it would not take that much for the car to get better and have a real opportunity to fight again against them properly. And we've seen that even like that, he can in some occasion, depending on the track. So I don't think Red Bull's going to just give up, and fully focus on next year. And it's a well-organized team, they can do things at the same time. Of course, at some point, if you realize you have nothing to gain anymore, you want to make sure you have a head start into 2026.
And you mentioned there that obviously you were flying and obviously had to turn off as a safety car came out. I mean, when you landed and got to see what happened after the safety car, what were your thoughts? Because obviously Antonelli's retirement kind of caused a bit of chaos.
Yeah. Of course, everyone has a different view. It was on the hard tires. It was obviously very difficult at that moment coming out of the last corner. We all know Max, he fights. He's not just going to give up like that. On the other hand, I got a bit surprised when Lewis got overtaken by Hülkenberg.
Yeah.
I thought, looking from the outside again, I would have thought he would close the door, but somehow he didn't. And I mean, Max, when you watch, he's not gonna give up. He's gonna fight very hard. So, of course, where is the limit is always difficult. But with him, that he's not gonna give up.
Looking ahead to Canada, of course, you've mentioned you've not been in the sim for a while, but the RB21 quite well. Is the circuit, the Gilles Villeneuve, somewhere you think should suit the car? Because it does seem that whilst Max has been able to do well at most circuits, for the second driver, whether that was Liam or now Yuki, it's been a real handful pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, Canada is not that easy, because you drive with very low downforce, and some of the team with budget cap and all the restriction, you sometimes don't have exactly the optimal perfect rear wing or level of downforce because you have to make choices, and you don't want to necessarily develop a wing just for one race. So it's a bit difficult to predict. I think it's going to be very close again, and obviously McLaren being very strong, you can expect them to fight obviously for the win. But it could be close for Max. And the weather, in the last few years, it's always been somehow a bit of rain there. So we all know how good he is on the wet.
For you, Seb, obviously it is Le Mans week. That's your focus for the next few days, away from Canada. It's been a bit of a tricky start for Toyota Gazoo this season. Obviously, Ferrari's looking the strongest team. How would you assess, just to conclude and wrap up this podcast for the week, how would you assess your chances going into Le Mans?
Well, I think quite good. If you look at the start of the season, people may assume, oh yeah, Ferrari is obviously dominating and we have no real chance. But I would not agree with that. Of course, also the BOP is totally different for Le Mans. It's not the same as for the rest of the championship, and we know how important that is, obviously, for the performance. So I'm looking forward to the weekend. I'm really confident we will have a fight. We will have an opportunity. Now it's just about making sure from obviously Sunday to the start of the race on Saturday that we optimize everything we have and get the most out of the car and get a good read on what tires to use when, because obviously in the night it's cold, you use different tires, when to change tires, look after obviously reliability would be important, but also how you can keep your tires alive. We know sometimes you do 3 stint, 4 stint, and if we can do a good job on that side, that could be a key factor in the race.
Seb, thank you so much for your time. We'll bring this to a wrap here, so you can go and enjoy your evening in Le Mans. I mean, we'd love to have you back in the future because that was unbelievable. For those who are watching this podcast on YouTube, please do smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. From Seb, Ian, and I, this has been the latest episode of the Racing News 365 podcast. See you later.
For me, Seb, thank you ever so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
As always, take care, folks.
Thank you, guys. See you all.